Oh, there they are, Ollie and Stan, back with you on a Wednesday morning, despite the fact that the world is falling to pieces and that energy prices are going through the roof, so that now I've reverted to a hot water bottle and a hot brick in the oven, wrapped in a nice towel just to keep my feet warm. It's not so serious that Ollie and Stan can't have a little bit of a giggle. Good morning, Ollie.
Good morning, Stanley.
A fine mess you've got us into, or is that your line?
Another fine mess you got us into, Stanley.
Well, I mean, let's play with some of the new stuff that we've got, because the first thing that we'll do, as usual, is right, Ollie. I have to say to you that I still think that a lot of the stuff in the newspapers is trivial compared to the fact that we've got the Russians at the gates, as it were. However, I think that we need to take a look at what seems to be um, the media concentrating on. So the Times, the Tories push the Prime Minister to act faster on waiting lists, which of course is trying to reduce the waiting time for the NHS. What's your comment on that?
Well, I think it's very, very good news. I remember back about not so long ago, last June, I had a hernia, and I phoned up the hospital, and I said, "Well, what's the waiting list?" They said, "Oh, the top of the waiting list is 93 weeks." I said, "Blimey, that's almost 2 years." So I was rather fortunate in the position that I was able to go private, which is what I did. And I'm glad I did because I'm hearing terrible stories coming out now. Somebody's had a hernia for about 4 years, and he's got the most amazing tummy. Looks as if he's going to. And it is. One can understand how the situation came about because it all goes back really to the lack of investment in the National Health Service for many, many years. And it was bound to come to this kind of disaster because the NHS couldn't cope with the pandemic and the backlog and the normal casualties and so on. And so, yeah, it was bound to happen, I think.
Well, the Daily Mail carries on with that, and its headline is that all we get for £12 billion? And that's the 12 billion that we've been promised is going to be pumped into the NHS. But it's saying that despite that, waiting lists are going to rise for 2 more years before they start to settle down. How much of that is lack of money, and how much of that is bureaucracy?
Well, I really don't know. Probably a bit of both, isn't it?
You think so?
Well, I blame Tony Blair for all this, really. Back in the day when he was Prime Minister, he actually said he's going to sort out the all the NHS, and he gave all the money to consultants, for God's sake. It should have let the matrons run the flipping place because they knew what they were doing. But all these consultants, for example, the one that did me privately also worked for the NHS, so he made twice the flipping money. It's just crazy. So I
Yeah.
think the bureaucracy Mr. Blair's mistake has come home to roost in a way.
Well, a lot of things over the last 15 years of governance are coming home to roost, aren't they? And we're going to get onto energy in a minute, but you'll want to take a bit of time on that. So we'll go through the rest of the headlines in the Daily Express. Shocking. 10 million missing out on NHS care. The Eye, which is the London
Excuse me.
paper, cost of living crisis, extra 1 million UK children set to go hungry. We'll go back to that. Let's just stay with the NHS for the moment because when several papers start to focus on it, then I start to think that it's a real story. Problems?
Well, yeah, probably you're right. Yeah.
Okay, cost of living crisis. Now we always get to these figures, and I'm never quite sure where the hell that they dig them up from. But an extra 1 million UK children set to go hungry. So extra, there is already, presumably, the implication of the headline in the Eye is that we've already got lots of children set to go hungry. Now, in a modern society, there's always going to be problems where the health services and the social services and so on do actually fumble the ball, and they do reach. But do we really have millions of children who are hungry in the United Kingdom, Stuart?
Well, I wouldn't begin to know. I mean, I don't know. I know that there is what the Americans call the underclass, the very poor people. I'm sure, I don't know how many millions of people that constitutes, but certainly, I mean, Margaret Rashford did actually expose the problem of school dinners, for example, and other people are digging out all kinds of things. Yeah, people are going hungry. I mean, because, I mean, if you look at what Martin Lewis, the pundit of personal finances and energy dealings and inflation dealings, he actually was saying that, the people who don't starve to death are going to freeze to death, but we'll get onto that later. So there are a lot of people who are going short. Yes, there is a huge. I don't know whether I don't know what the underclass is or the really, really poor are. I would say it was millions rather than a billion, but that's just a guess. Yeah.
Yes. Well, let me just go to that point for a moment, because you are somebody who's got his ear close to the ground. You're intelligent. You read the newspapers. You're savvy with the news and so on and so forth. If you don't know, surely there must be not only millions set to go hungry, if the headline is right, but there are millions who simply don't know. In other words, we're all faffing around in the dark, trying to sort something out that we know nothing about.
Well, I think that these things can be sorted to a certain extent, but I mean, it seems to me that Rishi Sunak is sort of applying plasters to broken legs in many respects. I mean, he's throwing the money around, I guess. He's throwing the money around, well, certain amounts of money around, because if he's going to be Prime Minister, he'll have to do it quickly, because he's going to run into the next Prime Minister, whoever he is, is going to run into a storm of problems. Maybe the inflation going up, the energy prices soaring, and the government having no idea what they're going to do about it. And so, if he's going to get the prize, then he has to get a move on. So if you look at what he's doing, he's just bunging money at these things in the hope that, as I say, but it seems to me that in many cases it's just, using the plaster to try and fix a broken leg, which can't be done.
Right. Now, the Financial Times, your old stomping grounds, and the Mirror both focus in their headlines on the windfall, or the suggestion of a windfall tax on BP profits. The Mirror says we've more cash than we know what to do with, quoting an executive, and the Financial Times is that BP rejects call for windfall tax as profits hit 8-year high of $12 billion. Now, this business of a windfall tax isn't quite as simple as it would appear, is it? I mean, it's your area of expertise.
It's most interesting indeed. Actually, BP's profits this year are 9.5 billion, while Shell is 14 billion. And the reason is the spike or the rise in global gas prices. We think of BP as an oil company, but it's Shell and BP who have lots of gas assets as well. And they have benefited from the increase, the full increase in gas prices, and where now, which is very, very interesting, because the argument in favour of these companies is that they produce huge dividends. Therefore, they have a huge amount of money that they are putting into pension funds. Okay? So a lot of money goes into pension funds. This is the argument. Well, a lot of Conservative supporters are old codgers on their pensions. So they're rather keen in not taxing these companies. On the other hand, if you're short of a bob or two, you might really feel that a windfall tax is rather a good idea, in a sense that you could use it to actually improve the condition of people who are actually being punished by the energy prices. So there we are. On the other hand, other people are saying, well, as a matter of fact, these pension funds are only 6% of the stock exchange, and they're not really that effective. So there you go. But my own feeling is that this argument really is very much in the Conservative Party's favour of not having a windfall tax.
Now, the people in the industry would say, "No, hang on. It sounds like a lot of money. So many billions, but that we need a hell of a lot to reinvest or invest in expansion of our companies." Now, of course, what we're doing is we're trying hard to move towards green, sustainable energy and away from oil companies. So it seems to me that there's an argument here that needs a clarification from an expert like you. Do they need to invest this money in expansion? And is expansion necessary when in fact we are moving away from oil, for instance, as an energy source?
What do you mean, investment in renewable energy?
Yeah, well, in their own companies. To build another pipeline, for instance, costs billions.
Well, yeah, but I mean, look, BP and Shell have a bit of chances, because Shell get these REGO things, which are coupons for investing in renewable energy. But Shell was working a bit of a scam in the sense that these REGO, they were using REGO to publicize that what they're doing is marvelous, rather than investing in renewable energy. BP is the same. They had a big renewable energy scheme, and then they put in the Isle of Grain, but then they canned that as well. So they don't need investing. BP and Shell do not need be much more invested in those rich as Croesus. Pair of them.
Right. Okay. Incidentally, we've got Rupert Lloyd Thomas, an old Louisian, watching in. I saw you nattering to his brother Andy the other day. We both know him, and Rupert is a sometimes contributor to Mirador, but always is popping in to see what we're talking about. So welcome to Rupert this morning. Now, can I just switch, Stuart, to your opinion, because I've got very definite opinions about this. That the Lewis District Council are going to move to New Haven and abandon the Southover premises on Southover Street that they've occupied for the last 10 or 15 or 20 years. My argument is, the more that we move the centre of local government out of Lewis, the less able are we to govern ourselves. We already have to go to Eastbourne for an awful lot, so now we're going to have to go to Eastbourne and New Haven. And already residents of New Haven have said, hey, we don't need the council down here. If you're going to throw money, bring in industry, bring in people who are job creators, who can help develop our rather sad little town. So I'm really very critical of the fact that we're leaving. What's happened with the local politicians is they've strutted around saying, "Oh, look at what a fine building it is! Look how we've made it so attractive to people to come in, and that the Charleston Trust, I think, are the prime people, and we'll earn £125,000 a year, which we can put towards the energy crisis and so on and so forth." I find that very muddled thinking. I like to think that the people that are governing us are here and understand our problems. Right, now I've had my rant. What's your view?
Well, I have no confidence at all in anything the district council does. They're totally incompetent. If you look at it now, the leader of the district council is a Green person. They come rattling on about climate change without any slight idea how they're going to achieve their zero carbon emissions to 2030. It's not going to happen. That's just one thing. Now, if you're talking about the Southover House, I had a little birdie in the council who actually gives me little stories, and he said the people in Southover House were kept there to ensure the pension fund was going to continue. You see, when the amalgamation with Eastbourne came along, the Eastbourne took charge of the pension fund of people who worked for the district council, and it turns out that the Eastbourne district council is pretty incompetent as well. And in running the pension fund, they found the Globe's most expensive financial advisor, which actually cost an absolute flipping fortune. So the fact that they've now got this other crackpot scheme comes as no surprise to me, quite frankly. I absolutely agree with you. I mean, we just need better governance by the district council, and it's not there, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Are they reflecting, though, a complete incompetence from every level of government on this energy issue? I read a very, very good article the other day by Alex Brummer, the name you would recognise as a financial journalist who seems to know what he's talking about. And he said it goes back to at least to 2015 with Ed Miliband saying, oh yes, what we'll do is we'll go green. And they set targets which they knew at the time were completely impossible to achieve. And that while we had cheap money and a booming economy and so on and so forth, they could hide behind that. Now the chickens have come home to roost, and we're all going to have to pay for their misjudgment. Having said that, what's your view on his view?
Well, I don't like to try and upstage Alex, but I was saying this long before he did. Remember, I told you that it was actually it was Ed Miliband in 2012 who said that if he got into power in the election of 2015, he would bring in an energy cap. Well, he didn't get into power. Mr. Cameron did indeed. And Mr. Cameron was totally spooked by the idea of an energy cap. And he said to the Competition and Mergers Authority, what shall I do? And they said, after a year, 2016, they reported that they should switch to cheaper suppliers rather. And we all know what happened there. As soon as the gas price spiked, more than half of them, 28 companies, went bust. We know what's happened then. And that is the situation we are now really in. And what's been happening? The Green Party, the government has actually come up. Well, it's totally nonplussed, actually, about what to do. First of all, it said it was going to abolish that. Then, secondly, They said they were going to get rid of the green levies. Right, well, that is 5%, that's 100 quid. The green levies are also 5%, that's about another 100 quid, so that's 200 quid. And the third thing they suggested was that they expanded the warm home discount. That is the discount for poor and vulnerable families who get a discount of 140 quid off their rent. None of these moves have been implemented. So next we have all these, a scheme by the government to have a contract of difference. Now, contract of difference is something that's worked terribly well for renewable energy, and it needs some explaining. Contract for difference is where the two parties, the government and the companies, agree on a price. If the price goes above what they've agreed, then the government has to pay the difference. If the price goes below what the two competence agreed, then the companies have to pay back to the government. They haven't implemented that either. Instead, we've had Rishi Sunak coming along saying he's throwing £9 billion at the problem. And what it means is they're going to get immediately, they're going to get 90 quid. That's not a lot of money, is it? And then they're going to get the next Ofgem sets of price, they're going to get 200 quid, but they're going to have to pay that back over the next 5 years. Sounds like it's piece of Robin Paul, as far as I can make out. Complete chaos.
I'm sorry, but I'm like you. I have lost confidence in our leadership at every level. But can I just say to you that I won't embarrass them this morning because they are quite a good company, or have been quite a good company. But my own supplier, I got a letter from the government saying, Keith, you're terribly frail and you're likely to fall over at any time, and we want to keep you warm and keep you at home. So we're going to give you £142 discount on your bill under this warm something or other scheme. Please go to your supplier. So I go to the supplier comes back and says, oh, I'm terribly sorry, we cut off applications some weeks ago. Our subscription list is full. So I go back and I say, but the government are saying that I've got to come to you. Well, come back in the autumn. Come back in the autumn. We don't care how cold you are now. Come back in the autumn, and perhaps what we might do is we might have reopened the scheme. Now, all these schemes are all very well, but by the time you've got the conditions and so on, they turn out to be useless, completely and utterly useless.
Well, Martin Lewis, the television pundit, is very, very good. He said those people who don't starve to death are going to freeze to death.
Well, I did put up a little comment piece. I don't think I've got it here, unfortunately, but I did put up a little comment piece on the energy companies, pointing out that what they were doing is that they were trying to help us with food conservation, because they are making it impossible to warm a house. So the house stays cool. So when you buy groceries, you don't need a fridge. So you're not using electricity to warm to use your fridge, because you can leave your produce on the kitchen table and it will stay cold enough so it's not going to rot.
Well, the only really good thing, beneficial thing, in my opinion, is that they have now abandoned their scheme to phase out gas boilers in favour of air-fuelled heat pumps. Now, 85% of homes are currently occupied by gas. Yes, they are polluting. Yes, they should be phased out. But it can't be done now, because you think of the cost of an air-fuelled pump. It's 10 grand to start it. Then you've got to improve the radiators, you've got to do insulation, you've got to get a boiler for the hot water and so on. And you're talking about 1,500 quid. Not many people can afford that. Meanwhile, I believe in we must do what we can to avoid climate change or all the rest of it. But the gas boilers seem to me to be here for quite some time.
Well, we'll come back to energy in a minute, or we won't go away. But just let me. I haven't told people yet what to expect in the weather outside. It is going to be a high of 12 degrees, which will hit about lunchtime, around 12 o'clock. It's about 6 degrees, or it started off at 6 degrees. It's about 9 degrees now, which is it's getting warmer all the time for the moment, except that we've got a big chill coming later in the week. Where the temperature is going to plunge to 7 again on Saturday. We can expect possibly some light rain and a gentle breeze today. So that's what you can expect outside. But let me ask you this, Stuart, because perhaps because I'm an international journalist and you're an international journalist, I tend to pay more attention to what's happening outside our borders to those things sometimes that are happening within, unless they are terribly important. We are taking our eye off the ball with Mr. Putin, who continues to build his forces on the Ukraine border. And I see that without being jingoistic, but Mr. Macron, President Macron, tore off to Moscow the other day and said, don't you worry, I've got a plan and I can sort it out and I can promise you that he will back off and all will be well. Well, Mr. Macron has come back with his tail between his legs because Putin apparently told him to sod off. But all this has an effect, does it not, on our energy sources and uncertainty in the markets about what's going to happen?
Hello.
Yes, can you not hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you all right, yeah.
Well, I think in terms of the energy, the figures I've seen is that 40% of our gas comes from Russia. I'm not sure that's the complete proper figure, because a lot of our stuff comes from Norway through an interconnector. It also comes through Belgium and so on. And there's an awful lot of it comes from tankers from Qatar. Qatar has an awful lot of LNG, which is liquid nitrogen, natural gas. Okay, and they've got a lot because back in the day we didn't have fracking in America, and they were hoping to export all that stuff to America. So it's standing there now, and they began as the fracking business in the States really grew. They spread some to the Far East. And now they found that we were a very ready market. So a lot of tankers go to the Isle of Grain and some of them off of Milford Haven. So I think that the 40% is far too high. I'm sure somebody will correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I am wrong. And that's one thing. Now, on the rest of the Ukraine, there was a wonderful piece in the Financial Times by Gideon Rachman, who's a very fine columnist indeed. And he said, what you're dealing with here is two people. It's Putin the rational, and Vlad the nutcase. It's Vlad's the nutcase, the madman, yeah? So it depends which day you get him on, I think. And I would say that Rachman really comes round to the view that Putin has been in power for 20 years. He knows the way the wires work, and I think Putin irrational is a better person to look at. Now, the sanctions which would be involved in holding him off would be severely damaging to the Russian economy, really damaging, and they would actually isolate the country in many ways. I mean, Russia has some nickel and some gold, but it's heavily dependent on its income through gas and oil. So if that was sort of affected by sanctions, then I think Mr. Putin will think twice about guiding in the troops. In fact, I understand, I heard some news really that there was a sort of military maneuver between Belarus and the Russian troops on the Ukrainian border where there was some kind of withdrawal. So maybe he's beginning to be rational. I hope so,
Yes.
anyway.
Now, some people will be watching and they'll say, okay, here are two old farts, Ollie and Stan, who sometimes are amusing, but this morning there are so many serious issues. We're not as funny as we normally are, or some people might think so. But they'll be saying, okay, what does this mean? Are energy prices really going to go soaring through the roof? And are we going to be able to stay warm for the rest of this winter and the beginning of next? So perhaps you'd give us your analysis on that.
I think that there is no indication or no prognosis that the gas prices are going to come down. There is a global shortage of supply, and that seems to be continuing for a long time. And I think that our energy crisis is going to continue, to be perfectly honest. I can't see. I mean, the government has said, oh, when the prices get cheaper, and it will happen. Yeah, but I don't think it can happen overnight. I really don't. Certainly not, in the foreseeable future.
All right, let's tap your expertise again, because I saw the other day that one analyst was saying, well, look, we've still got huge reserves in the North Sea, and the government actually gave out 4 licenses. I don't know whether it's for exploration or whether development. Is that a saviour if we relaxed the?
Well, the word enormous is a total mistake. We became energy dependent stopped in 2004 when we started having to import gas and oil. Yes, there has been some improvement in stuff, but we couldn't cope on the gas that's in the North Sea. It just doesn't meet the match. So we get, as I say, Norway and Qatar and some from Russia. Not as much as people think, but it's enormous reserves is just a complete mistake. I mean, the reserves in the North Sea are just to reach their past. They've been used up.
So it's false hope to suggest that.
Well, we've also got the problem that the government allowed it, British Gas, Centrica, to close down the reserve, the reserve called Rough, which was a storage in the North Sea, and that meant closing that down. We've only got 2% of annual demand in reserve, right? That we can call on. Germany has 30% of their annual demand. France has 20% of annual demand. It's an absolute another government cock-up. Why did they allow the Rough reservoir to close down?
Yes. Right. Okay. I'm sorry. I slightly interrupted you there, but not in your voice. So we got the message. I mean, really, I suppose what I'm saying is that everybody is now looking around for some sort of saviour, and what you're saying is it ain't there, mate.
Well, I don't think there is. It is there. I mean, we haven't got any reserves of gas to depend on. 2% of annual demand. And yeah, okay. They think Russia's got a gun to our head. Well, I could be wrong, but I don't think it has. But it's a very, very dire situation, and it's all the fault of the government's mishandling of the energy supply situation for many, many years.
Right. Okay, let's take a pause, Stuart, because it's 8:34 and we've been going on for 30 minutes now. Shall we just say here's one of the things that we're going to keep our eye on throughout throughout this year, particularly up to June. Oh dear. Oh, there we go. Right. Now, a couple of things there. First of all, your old Fleet Street pub was there, but one of the first images there, Stuart, was that it was smog. And that, of course, was a big energy thing when the Queen ascended to the throne in 1952. Most people don't remember what a smog is. And what was the cause of it?
Well, it was air pollution basically. It was gases getting into the air by the person and mixing the rest of it. And the smog was a combination of fog and sort of rather obnoxious emissions. Actual weather, as in fog plus air pollution, exhaust, things like that coming up. You had smog, and I remember I was growing up in the 50s. The conductor used to get off and walk in front of the bus. Remember that?
Yeah.
We have a little lamp. He used to walk in front of the bus. It was almost Victorian. It was really quite weird. Yeah.
Yeah, well, now we've been really giving a bad time to our leadership from in the 2000s about emissions and so on. But actually, the smog in 1952 was pretty bad, and the amount of smoke and pollution pumped out in the air in London was huge. Why were they so successful in reducing that when we're having all sorts of problems today?
I wouldn't know. I don't know. I was only 10 at the time, for God's sake, I didn't know that much about energy when I was 10 years old.
Yeah. But I mean, over a period of a decade or so, I mean, I remember, for instance, I was in Canada at the time, but it made international news that fish had appeared for the first time in dozens and dozens and dozens of years in the Thames, in the lower reaches of the Thames, which was so polluted. So, I mean, as an energy expert and what's happening today, you must have a view on how well we did or how badly we did or what the effect of that is on where we stand today.
I don't think there's any relationship. I mean, I remember growing up in the 50s, life was very grey and boring. Rationing until 1954. I remember you could go to the sweet shop on Sunday and ask for 2 ounces of American hard gums, and that was about it. And then my mother would go to poor working class family. My mother would buy a huge joint of lamb on Saturday. We'd have a roast on Sunday, mince on Monday, cold meat on Tuesday, cottage pie on Wednesday. Can't remember what we had on Thursday, but on Friday we were allowed to have fish. and that was it. Life was hard, actually.
Yeah, but if we to believe the headline which we looked at a little while ago, what paper was it in? All right. The I newspaper is that 1 million UK children set to go hungry, and as you say, life was hard. Is it going to be that much harder today? I'm sounding callous. What I'm trying to do is for me to get some sort of perspective on what it was and what it is, and whether in fact we sometimes exaggerate some of these things. I know somebody will cut my head off for suggesting that, but nonetheless, I really feel that I need to know and that millions more need to know. Is it a real crisis, or is it something that's being spun?
Well, look, it's long 1950s when the Labour Party got in. Attlee, he had a Ministry of all the talents and he did amazing things. I mean, the National Health Service was created in that regime, and I personally feel that is our greatest achievement as a country to have that. The welfare state was opposed, and all these other things were created during that era. and they're getting a bit old and worn now, and careworn now in their application. And I think that really has been for the lack of investment in terms of energy as well. As you know, I write about this regularly, and my conclusion is there has not been enough investment in renewable energy companies to actually meet the emission target by 2050 or in 2030, because that is a question of investment, Keith. And that is what is needed in many, many areas. I mean, if you look at the poor, that when whatever his name was, couldn't quite work out the pension credit, and they couldn't put it all into one, where all the poor people would get one lump sum, and they're now having to wait for their pensions and their credits and all kind of things. I think basically these institutions of what you might call the neoliberal era have become worn and need to be sort of topped up a bit more, or invested in a bit more, and therefore it's left to the private sector, people like Marcus Rashford and others actually trying to sort of fill the gaps which the government's not doing.
Sorry, I had a little cough there. Thank goodness we got a little cough switch. Right, Stuart. I think we've had a much of your thinking on the energy situation. So perhaps what we should do is, just for the last few minutes that we're on, it's now 8:45, and the weather is it's looking not bad out there, although the clouds are beginning to gather a little bit. But I thought that because we like to have a bit of fun, there are a couple of headlines which I think will amuse you, and that is that when everything is falling down around us, is the Metro has gone on with the WAG wars, which are getting ugly because there are a couple of WAGs, and there's a libel case going on between former friends Rebecca Vardy and Colleen Rooney. In other words, the wives of the two footballers. Vardy, I think, was Leicester, and Rooney was Manchester, of course, but he's now a manager of is it Stoke? But
no, he's been at Derby, but I think he's in the running.
Derby. You're quite right. You're quite right. Yeah, he took over from the mouth.
Right.
Okay.
Derby's
So what do you make of this?
Derby's at the bottom of the Championship now.
Well, perhaps that says something about her husband. But what about this handbags at 20 paces? I mean, I suppose it's fascinating for a lot of people, particularly since when I switched on to double check what I do is I look for the news and I go through it, and then I switch on to double check to see what the BBC is saying, which is almost a waste of space now, because they're not saying very much first thing in the morning. Their serious news comes later in the day. But the headline was the Oscars, and I thought, isn't that funny? I wasn't aware that the Oscars were on last night. But apparently these were the music Oscars, and they are the British music Oscars. So it basically it's on the home front. And here we've got the lady who cancelled her concerts, Adele. And now we've got Vardy and Rooney at handbags at 10 paces. What do you make of it all? I mean, if you and I are going to have a duel, surely we're going to ask for pistols.
Well, my wife likes to watch celebrity television, but I don't watch it, so I don't know about these things. I don't know who Adele is. Apparently, she sings songs or something. I don't know.
Yeah, well, you and I sing songs occasionally. In fact, we were at the pub together the other day and we burst out singing.
My knowledge of popular music ends at 1968.
Well, I saw a movie with Rosemary Clooney in the other day, and she was my favourite singer in the day, and she was with Bing Crosby, and they appeared together in White Christmas, as I recall, and that's got to be a 1950s film, if I'm not far out.
Well, look, the thing is, look. The thing is, you've got to remember that Mr. Murdoch is still alive, and he's still, he's still, in charge of his gutter press, and he actually sells Sons on the basis of pandering to the lowest common prejudice, soaking up fears, and titillation. So he likes to titillate, as we know, and all he writes about all these celebrities because it sells papers. Believe it or not, people read the bloody Sun to find out about Mrs. Rooney and Mrs. Vardy. And, it's a celebrity newspaper. So the whole Murdoch press seems to be sort of stunted around about wags and whatever you call them. Because it does sell newspapers. It's like the royal family. When I remember friends at the Daily Mail used to say to me that any story at all about Princess Diana put on about 60,000 copies. Whether it's, Diana was seen sneezing in the King's Road the other day, it's going to 60,000 people are going to buy it to read that kind of thing, Sneezing at Chelsea Road? That's a bit vulgar, isn't
it? Sorry, suddenly the light seems to have gone out of my little studio here, so I'm looking very dark and you're looking very light now. Tell me this, because you mentioned royalty, and quite seriously, that if you hang on long enough with a serious issue, is people change their minds. And yesterday there was the headline that the Queen has now approved that Camilla will become, I think it should be called the Queen Consort, but that she will be the Queen. Now, at the time of Diana's death, there was no, she'll never be queen, and Charles was saying no, I will enter into this marriage with no expectation, and so on and so forth. So what they're really saying to me is, if we hold on long enough, everybody will forget, and then they'll get behind us. Have you got any feel, or does it bother you whether she'll be queen or not?
Well, the royal family is the biggest soap opera of all, isn't it, really? I mean, if you think about it, the Queen, if she had been head of any other kind of institution, she would have been fired years ago. I mean, she's had 3 divorces in the family. One of them is suspected to be gay, and then and so on. But the Queen is enormously popular. She is enormously popular because we do still live in a deferential society, and she's the Queen, she's wonderful. But she is a very fine person. Her sense of duty is incredible. And because she's never meddled in politics, she's always stood above it, she is very, very, very popular. And what's going to happen when she goes is going to be a right old mess, I reckon. Because, Charles doesn't have that following, although his status has improved over the years. But, I think of him as the person who ratted on Diana, don't they? That's still his sort of feeling about him, although I think probably a lot of people have come round now, and that Camilla has been doing good things. And, of course, William and Kate are star impersonators, aren't they? Kate seems to have actually really got the knack of it all much better than Princess Diana did, unfortunately. So I don't know. It's difficult to know, isn't it? I think really that the royal family is going to be a bit messier once the Queen goes. That's
I
my
apologise that suddenly I've gone dark. I don't know whether a light blue or what happened, so I do apologise that I seem to be now in the dark and I'm not. But it's not working, and I'll make sure that I address that before we come on tomorrow. Now, can we just because it's 8:52, we're coming up towards the end of our stint. Can I just remind people that you will be recording tomorrow, or actually you'll be going live with a program called Energy Matters with Stuart Dolby on Mirador Television. What is Energy Matters?
What is Energy Matters?
Yeah.
Well, it's about the energy crisis, basically. And how do we come to this mess? What this mess? So we'll be talking about that. Well, mind you, I've covered quite a lot of the ground today, but anyway, there's repeating tomorrow.
Yeah, well, it was never assumed that either things stick with people or that everything, I think, when it's important, bears saying many, many times. So we'll look forward to that. But I'm just highlighting to people that you do have your own program that lasts anywhere from 10 minutes to 20 minutes, depending upon how much you've got to say, and it's called Energy Matters. And it goes out normally on a Thursday, and Stuart, it's Stuart's program, and he brings you up to date with absolutely everything that's going on in the energy world, and it is a crisis amongst all sorts of things like the ice cake in number 10. It is very much a look, an expert look at the energy scene and what we can expect. So keep an eye open for it. Stuart Dolby, Energy Matters. And you're actually going to, hopefully as time goes on, Stuart, you're hoping to be able to interview some of the key people in the energy world so we can get a better insight.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Right, okay, now, just thinking in terms of the Jubilee and how old we are, do you remember this as a delicacy? Hot
Bread and dripping.
toast.
bread and dripping.
Oh yes, well, somebody put in one of the social media. Did they remember that their mothers used to put in a pantry or whatever the bacon fat in a little tin, and it was brought out to cook with. And whoever the correspondent was said, it tasted so good if you had food cooked in the bacon dripping lard. Yeah, I suppose lard really was from the Sunday roast, was it not?
Yeah, no, it was called bread and dripping, wasn't it? It was disgusting.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, it's 8:55, and I think time for us to say goodbye. But there are lots of
Actually,
things.
can I just make one different thing? Both you and I have done time as journalists in Ulster, in Northern Ireland. And they have there what is called the Ulster Fry, and that's full of all kinds of drippings and gas. It's so fun, and that's why most Northern Ireland people are very pasty-faced.
Because of the Ulster Fry.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I was introduced to that. I started to live, if you like, in Northern Ireland in 1975. And that's when I really found that, particularly in my early years there, where I stayed, where a lot of BBC people stayed, a place called Camera House, which is a wonderful boarding house run by a lady who had managed to get most of her crockery from the BBC. So you ate on BBC plates. But the Ulster Fry was something called fadge. And fadge was sort of somewhere between fried potato, and a potato cake. many people at the breakfast table were very vocal if there was no fadge available with the Ulster fry. Do you remember fadge?
Yeah, I remember black pudding. I don't remember fat. Black pudding.
Oh,
And
indeed.
God, what was white pudding? And God knows what else. Even the smell of it could actually make you feel.
Right, you are. I always like to go out with something gentle. So let's see if we. There's a nice little thing here. I think that their colleague. I can't quite find that, but here is my favourite of a place in Lewes that is calm and welcoming and a lovely place to go. Okay, I'm not having any luck at all with the lighting, and I do apologise for that because it's not easy when you're in the dark like this to concentrate. Stuart, you're perfectly all right. Your lighting is good. Mine disappeared for some reason partway through the broadcast, so I'm sorry about that. But we have come to the end. It's 8:59. We, Stuart Dolby, otherwise known as Ollie, and Keith Hayes, his sidekick Stan, broadcasting on Mirador Television and trying hard to make sense of the energy crisis and the other crises around us. So people will see you tomorrow with your own programme, Ollie?
Yep, absolutely.
Right, okay, well, let's say goodbye then. Toodle pip.
Goodbye.